Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Quick bit of rubric. So, in the event of emergency, I've asked the hotel staff they'd like us to meet out in the front. Apparently the fire department likes to go across the street, but they said there'll be staff there to point us to where we go. So, straight out the doors, exactly the way you came in, out the front door and onto the street, and then we'll go from there. If you need the washroom's out on the left, down the corridor past the bar, do not stop in the bar, keep going, and then on the right hand side, you'll be good to go from there. A few words about the IET, for those who don't know. We're a worldwide organization. We have 154,000 members, approximately, in 189 countries. And we're here on behalf of Northern California. This is the Northern California chapter. My name is Alan Casey, I'm the chair. I have my other leads, Sonia, Ronjon, and John. And between us, the idea is that we are here to further the belief and encourage the use of professional organizations for continuous personal development, informing the community of the role of the engineer and the benefits they do bring, and giving people opportunities to practice talking in public, giving seminars, etc., etc., etc. So, for those of you who are not in the IET, we're not going to try and sell you a membership, that's not what we're here to do, but we are looking for people who are interested in presenting, talking, giving us ideas of seminars, or saying, hey, I'd like an opportunity to present, I have a big thing going on, I've got a school thing going on, and I'd like to talk in front of some people for some constructive feedback who aren't my classmates or workmates. And we'd be absolutely thrilled to do that. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Ian Nock, and I'm just going to say over to you.
Right, okay. So I've got a little presentation here this evening, and it's a general presentation. You're not going to have your nose bleeding, your ears bleeding from the amount of high-tech information going into them, but you're going to be given a background on the key aspects of media technology in a way that you actually have never thought of before, because there's a lot going on in it, especially for a subject in terms of television, which includes streaming, it includes social media, video, etc., that accounts for approximately a quarter, if not more, of your waking life every single day, because that's what the average figures are for consuming of video content is. Okay, it's very true what the founder of Netflix said once when he said that we're not competing with Disney, we're not competing with cable TV companies, we're competing with sleep, basically. So just to introduce myself, as I say, Ian Nock. I am a consultant working for my own little company called Female West. We consult with all sorts of technology and operator companies in the space, people as diverse as Deutsche Telekom, through KPN, and all the way through to the smallest startups, basically. I'm also the vice chair, not the chair, the vice chair. I have been the chair before, but we do like to stir it up a little bit, of the IET Media Technical Network, which is the more sort of vertically oriented aspect of the IET, focused on specific technical subjects and industries. So what I'm here today with is this, a wide range of subjects, just to give you a little bit of an introduction on, mapped out as an alphabet from A to Z. See, I can do an adaptation there to the letters. It's not A to Z, A to Z. And so we're going to go through them quickly, and I'm not going to promise to do them in any particular order either. I'm just going to make sure I got a subject for every single letter. Okay? So we're going to start with the first one, which is AI. Now, there's a lovely little chart here. It describes the greater view of what is artificial intelligence, as represented by many different organizations, but I'm not going to go into too much depth with it. Mainly, or to point out really that the most exciting bits of work happening today are all in the deep learning and machine learning arena just here. This is the sort of past, almost, of AI. Specifically, knowledge-based systems and fuzzy logic, because that was amounted to my research in the field 30 odd years ago. And I love telling people now that I was in the dead end part of it, and nothing really came of it because everyone realized it was too complicated to do all the algorithms yourself. But really, since I'm not going to really talk about AI, let's talk about another letter, A. Adaptive bitrate. Now, this is an interesting thing. All of you who do video streaming today are making use of this wonderful little technique, and it's how we deliver video over the internet, a network that actually isn't designed to deliver video. It's designed to deliver packets in a very haphazard fashion with a lot of retransmission. It's not designed to deliver constant streams of high data rate video to your home. So they use something called adaptive bitrate encoding, and adaptive bitrate encoding comes in many different forms. The main forms are these lovely acronyms at the bottom, which come from various different companies that are involved in the space, but the key concept that's shared by all of them is that you take a video stream, you look at that video stream as a high bitrate video stream, you then make slower bitrate versions of that video stream in a ladder type construction and place segments of that video on a server on the internet, a web server here, and provide a manifest, a list of those video streams to the client in some way, shape, or form. And that manifest, the local client then looks at that manifest and tries to play the fastest one it can across the relatively low speed internet it has between itself and the web server. And it works pretty well. And in fact, you spot when it doesn't work particularly well, when your picture actually starts to block out a little bit. That's when it's picking at a lower ladder point, when it decides that it can't serve that video in a quick enough way to the screen for you to actually watch it well. So it decides to drop down to a lower quality and lower bitrate version of that service to make sure you continue to get the video that you want to watch. I must say though, a well-managed setup, you won't see that very often. If there's a problem occurring like that in your home, it's because your internet provider or the service provider is having a problem they really should try to deal with, because it really should work very well. In fact, by and large, a well-managed setup, the top ladder point, the high quality bit should be played all the time, and the lowest first step on the ladder is only used when you're starting the video. That's important, by the way, because it's a way we get the video to work really quickly, because I don't know if you noticed, the start of most on-demand videos these days, the first 5 seconds is easily just black. So that actually allows it to basically prime the pump particularly well, in fact. Okay. Next, let's go to B. Broadcast. This is how people consume most video in this world. Even today, it's by broadcast mechanisms. And broadcast is exactly what it says it is. It's taking one source and transmitting it to be received by many. And you will find that on terrestrial broadcast here in the US using ATSC, which is the standard used for broadcasting here across antennas. You'll find it on your cable networks. You'll also find it on your IPTV networks, although there they will call it multicast, because it really is not quite sending it to every single device, only to those devices that are listening. And you'll also see it on satellite. Not much really else to be said for that, other than the fact it's still the most common form of video consumption, even in the US today, by broadcast. It's just about starting to be the least common, simply because streaming is overtaking. Streaming will eventually overtake pretty much all broadcast. There's many reasons for that, which we'll go into around IP video streaming a little bit later. So we'll move on to another letter. C. Codecs. Video is actually very, 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 very large amounts of data. Even when you've compressed it, it's still very large amounts of data. And when we deliver it to your home via the broadcast or via streaming, we actually have compressed it. To give you an example, it used to be that a standard definition video signal required 270 megabytes per second That's megabytes per second of data. But bytes, very stressed bytes. Yeah, and in fact, even when compressed today, your HDMI cable connecting your set-top box to your television, that HDMI cable is one of the highest data rate things you've got in your home. Because even the lowest spec cable is designed for 18 gigabits per second of video. And then something called HDMI 2.1, it goes up to 48 gigabits per second. So to give you an example, 4K video needs up to 18 gigabits per second. If you want to go to 8K video, then you need 48 gigabits per second. That's a lot of data. Now, we compress it though, we're using lots of these things called codecs. We also decompress it, and that's the reason why we call it codec, because it's encoding and decoding. And these little lines here give examples of the codecs we've used over the last 30 or so years. Going forward in time to the present, where we use the ones on the right-hand side there showing, and these are some of these you would have heard of a little bit maybe. You may have heard of MPEG 2. Maybe. It may have been written in the inside of a manual for something. You may have heard of MPEG 1 layer 3. MP3 is its more normal name. You've heard about that from your music. And this was a great way of compressing music, which made music streaming that much more achievable, even just 20 years ago. But these days, you'll find that pretty much all video is something called H.264-based encoded video, or AVC. Now, there's two names because there were two different standards bodies involved at the same time, and they alternated the publication of the same information about 6 months later than each other. And even I, as someone who works in the field, I can't be bothered to keep track of which is which, ITU or whatever, yeah? It doesn't matter. What matters is they produced a way of compressing video under the MPEG name, which got better and better and more efficient, so that AVC today is what you use for pretty much all HD video and streaming, but there are new codecs required to deliver 4K, and certainly anything beyond 4K. And the ones you'll start to hear a little bit more about are HEVC and AV1. Now, AV1 is important because it comes with a second tranche of codecs. The first leg is the formal standards. The second leg is where industry organizations got together and actually made their own codecs. And AV1 is an example of a codec from a organization called AOM, the Alliance for Open Media, and it was mainly down to the fact that they didn't want to pay for the patents for having a way of encoding high quality video, and therefore they created an alternative to the HEV strand, the MPEG strand. And the people involved in AOM are very famous. They're people like Google, Apple, etc. But there you go. Well, at the moment, still today, most video is an MPEG-based video codec, except on YouTube. I wonder why. No. No. Because things like H.264 has only been around since 2005, 6, 7, etc. And it's the techniques that are used to create the encoding, which is what patented, not necessarily the instantiation of the actual standard the first day. But the other thing about it is nothing particularly wrong with that, other than the fact there are license fees that will be payable. What's interesting is where you got the fact that AOM themselves, although they say there are no license fees, there are several organizations in this world who believe they own patents that apply. In other words, the people who actually sell the product or provide the product are not necessarily the ones who want to be paid for the product. Okay, codecs. Now let's talk about encoding. The letter E. We'll come back to D, of course. Now, encoding a video, now this is one of the more complicated things. It's not just like taking a photograph lots and lots of times and sending each of those images over and over and over again to the device to display them. We are a little bit cleverer than that. And the way they do that is they do something called a group of pictures, a GOP, And what they will do is they will capture a full image, which is an iframe, the letter I here, and then they will create a lot of frames in between, which are called B and P frames, which are creating the differences that are occurring between the two iframes in the series of a group of pictures. And that difference involves looking forward to picture frames in the future, as well as in the past, which in itself, if you think about it, is quite interesting idea. How can you look into the future? Well, the secret about encoding is even real-time encoding is always done a little bit in the past, and this is where you get something called latency occurring. Yeah, they have to capture a certain amount of the picture frames and encode it to then be able to start delivering the frames because of the way that they encode the image for best efficiency using these predictive and bi-predictive frames. These frames, the B frames are looking forward in time and behind, are the frames behind it. So what you end up with is to create an image on your screen. They send a lot of frames of pictures, sending frames, only some of which, the two iframes, actually have the full image. The rest are differences of the movement on the screen. And there's a lot of high-order mathematics behind that, using, so I always get this hit in my head, discrete cosine transformations, DCTs, as well as other mathematics that actually lend itself quite well to having machine learning techniques applied to them to optimize them. But we'll come back to that in a little while. Now, they have a phrase which are called tools, describing all the techniques that are used to make these frames work really well. And that's what's the optimization piece. Because which tool you use in the set of tools you're given by a particular codec depends very much on what the image is and what you're trying to show. So high action sports content is different from slow action romance. Yeah, the way they will compress the images, they need to actually apply the tools in ways that actually make the best efficient and high quality content coming out of the encoder. Yeah, and that's why they do a lot of research in this area, because actually it's probably one of the most complex things you can get in this world. Possibly even up there with nuclear fission. I mentioned also there that live encoding is hard. It's one of the hardest issues that we've got out there because of that issue that they want to do it in real time. But as I mentioned, all encoding is looking at the whole complete stream of a video that it's got, as much of the video it's got, and making predictions about the future. And the only way it can do that is if it captures some of it in a certain buffer and then encodes and then delivers the video. So there are a lot of inefficiencies when it comes to live video. File encoding is a lot less complex, but actually it also has its own challenges because what people do is that they encode really efficiently. They encode multiple times and apply machine learning techniques at times to actually optimize for quality, which is the reason why if you've got a live stream from something, it could be using 20 megabits per second of video bandwidth. And if you've got a recorded film from Netflix, it could be as low as 7 megabits per second for the same sort of content, just because of the way they can really truly optimize for live, for file-based, as they call it, encoding. Okay. Now, I've got a little diagram there just to show you the complexity you can actually get from this. That is literally a standard model of a I think it's AVC encoder, which shows all the blocks and techniques, including the feedback loops for how it feeds back about pictures from the future, about how it wants to actually encode the changes and differences in the frames. Yeah, not quite the same as film anymore, much more complex. So moving on from E, I'm going to move to Y. I'm going to show you this rather interesting little slide. When you actually have a picture of video, you may have heard of red, green, and blue for the way you actually create the light, use light to actually create all the different colors. Well, actually, that's not how we do video. That would be too inefficient if we had to actually capture all the red values, the green values, the blue values, and the brightness values, the luminance values. and that would be 4 sets of data we'd have to then deliver to a device. And also, you could only display that video, that picture, if you had all 4 of those sets of bits of information to actually display the picture. What we actually do is something that came about because of a mistake, an idea that they came across when they had black and white television and color television. And that is, you can separate the luminance, the black and the white effectively, from the color information. And you can also combine the color information together in a way that you can just not include some of the information or combine the information. And this is what is YUV, which is luma and chroma of red, chroma, blue. And if you add all the images that are sent, just from those 3 sets of values together, you end up with an actual image. So we've already reduced the number of data bits by 1 for every 4 bits of information you need. So you go down to just 3. That's a level of compression in itself. And again, you might actually see the letters Y, U, and V on old video recorders, maybe in a DVD player. Because normally it's written on the back because the little old analog plugs you used to have these things written on them. Now, this is actually in the analog video space. Now it gets a little bit more complicated. What comes next is the fact that actually the color space you then define using those 2 values, the chroma, you can represent a lot of different colors. And that's what you're shown here. This is something called a CIE 1931 XYZ color representation or color gamut. Effectively, it's showing every single color you can see and more, in fact, much, much more. Every single color that can actually exist. And it shows it in 2 dimensions here because we don't include the luminance component. Yeah? Well, engineers like to simplify things. The thing we do is we ignore the luma. We focus on the color. But what we've got here on the right-hand side is what they call the 3D color gamut, showing the luma component as well, which also tells you something really very interesting already. That not all colors can be represented at all brightnesses. There's a limitation. Obviously, black is black, white is white. There's no such thing as a bright white and a dim white. Yeah, so those don't exist. But it's important to understand that because it comes to something very important about the way that we present color for video, and that is all of the engineering of it is based on one component that we have no control over, the human, the eyes. We have to model the way the eyes see color, and at times that's very scientific, and at times it's very artistic. And people have been working for literally over 100 years to try and get this done well. And even then, today, we still have challenges with representing color and understanding it. After all, if anyone remembers the gold dress or blue dress situation, that's down to the way our eyes see color and different things. The other thing we've got as well with our representation of color is actually when creating video, we do something really clever when we're capturing video. We don't actually capture all of it at times, because again, it's a lot of data. This looks incredibly complicated on screen. It is very complicated, but the most important thing to take away from this is that there is something called 444 video, which is where we capture all of the luma, all of the chroma, both for red and blue, and you can capture that information, all of it if you wish, and send that and record it onto disk, record it onto file, and send that to your device. And that's really high quality. But what we found out is that humans are not very good. Our eyes are not very accurate when it comes to color. So what they've figured out, actually, we can throw away lots of the color, not send that, not record it and not send it, and we'll still see the same high quality image. And in fact, imagine if you were capturing pixels. What we have done is by doing something here, we can actually encode as something as low as 420, which is the most common form of encoding video. We can basically encode all of the luma, but then only decide to pick 2 points are from each of the 2 chromas, and that will represent still the same picture without you noticing that we've lost information. And that's really important to do. So that's the end of the video slide. So I've literally gone there in a few slides. I've gone through the whole way that video is encoded and captured at a very deep level. And the most important thing you can take away from all that is that we use understanding of the human eye to make televisions lie to your face. Then we got something else. The other wonderful thing about people's eyes, and actually old CRT screens, is they're not linear. They apply a gamma function to both of them, luckily. Miraculously, our eyes work on a gamma function. CRT screens used to work as a gamma function. The combination of the two together allowed us to actually create an image that looked right. Some would say that coincidence, some would say that's really good engineering on either side. But basically what it comes down to, what gamma is you change the luminance to reveal more data, more detail about an image. And you focus on the fact that as the luminance gets brighter, you can actually apply more discrimination between the light levels by using gamma to increase effectively the data points, the digital way of representing those points. You can actually increase the amount of information you can capture about those images. So you can end up with really high contrast images like this, using a high gamma, or with a very low contrast with a low gamma. And as I said, the old CRT system in this world used to have its own gamma for converting the opposite way to reproduce that image. What it really means is we're not very good at seeing dark. We're very good at seeing light differentials. Okay. Frame rate. We don't see with a frame rate, but we detect it. Frames being obviously each single individual picture delivered over and over again to your eyes in a way that you actually then see a moving image. You know, the old cine cameras they used to have in the 1920s, they used to do that with a hand crank. You've seen them doing this, cranking away. And actually they were very good back then. When there was a lot of action, they'd move it quicker and have more frames. And when there was not a lot of action happening, they'd move it slower. They literally would do a variable frame rate, depending upon how much they wanted to see. Of course, you then had to provide people with instructions for doing that. So they had to have a view of how to standardize that. And that's actually why an organization called SMPTE came into effect. The Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, or at least the organizations that preceded it. Because you had to standardize on a frame rate, and they did. They standardized on 24 frames per second. A nice slow is steady frame rate. Then when television came along, they wanted to standardize on, and for US television, 30 frames per second. Okay? Because they felt that's something they could do, and it's not just they felt it. There was a reason why they picked on 30. They picked on 30 because they could create clock signals that drove the televisions better off the frequency of the electricity. So they could use the 60 hertz electricity to generate a clock signal with high accuracy. Good engineering, I like that. There was a problem though with 30 frames per second. When they created video and audio for that, they found it actually didn't fit into the bandwidth they had available, the frequency bandwidth. They had not enough. So they had to fiddle it. And the way they fiddled it, they slowed down the frame rate so that actually the 30 frames you captured actually took longer than 1 second to actually play out. And actually the way humans work, we didn't notice. So that has actually got a name. They call it fractional frame rates. It's the reason why you'll hear about, if you've got a look at a camera, it will say 23.976 instead of 24 in the US. And it will say 29.97 in the US for 30 frames per second. Because literally they became heavily focused on that approach. And that's still present today. In fact, I was at a conference recently, where I listened to how all the engineers in the US still discussed how they couldn't get rid of fractional frame rates, despite the fact that the original limitations, the clock frequencies for getting the actual sampling for the frame rate, and the spectrum limitation no longer exist. But we still have fractional frame rates. And it's pain for everyone else in the rest of the world because we have to convert for it. But we have so many frame rates now out there now, particularly for 4K HDR content. You'll have up to 60 frames per second here, or 59.94 for the US, or we have 50 and 25, of course, in Europe and the UK. This is a really interesting. In fact, there are entire companies that their entire existence is just selling equipment that just do frame conversions. Incredible. Okay, I for interlace. This was another trick, because when they actually calculated how much bandwidth they needed, they realized they couldn't do it at 60 frames per second, or at 30, not frames, 30 fields per second. So what they did was that they noticed that they could actually generate imagery, and your eyes could see half the frames, and you would still see the image. Well, thankfully, this only exists on broadcast. This doesn't exist on your lovely stream video. So thank God for that. Now, jumped across to you for Ultra HD. Now, this is where we get to really nice content. This is where you're going to start spending money when you go and get Netflix, and you go and get Disney, and you get Comcast for the lovely Super Bowl, and they're going to deliver the content to you in Ultra HD. And this is where they put 4K video together with high dynamic range, with wide color gamut, with next generation audio. They won't do high frame rate yet, because that's the 100 and 120 frames per second. And then they'll use something called content-aware encoding to make sure that they can deliver these really large amounts of data to your TV without using so much data. This is actually a definition by the Ultra HD Forum, which is an industry global association forum, basically made up of member companies such as Comcast, BBC, etc., who are there defining best practices and guidelines for delivering video. I brought it up here because, apart from anything else, I'm also the chair of the Ultra HD Forum Interoperability Working Group, so I do a lot of technical work there. But what do all these things mean? H, high dynamic range. So, this is something very interesting. Today, when you have standard dynamic range television content, it is normally captured in what they refer to as 6 stops of dynamic range. For those of you into photography, you'll know what those are. A stop is where it's a doubling of the intensity of the light. And that's pretty good, actually. Standard dynamic range. It kept us going for 80 plus years, no problem. But when you look at the world yourself, you see a lot broader dynamic range than that. And that's what Ultra HD is trying to do. It's trying to represent the world in the world into video in a way that allows you to have a much more higher level of realism in the content. So even if you're watching TV, you might even get slightly, you have to like blink a little bit when you see the sun on screen. It could be that bright, but it all depends on your TV screen. But high dynamic range is defined very poorly and very loosely. It just means anything other than standard dynamic range. But you'll hear some figures bandied around, like something called nits. Nits. Yeah, not a small animal that infests your scalp. It is a unit of measurement, which is an easier way of saying candelas per meter squared for those people who speak in metric. Yeah. Now, what is high dynamic range in nits? Well, actually, it doesn't really correspond. A standard dynamic range television is actually reproducing content with a peak brightness of 100 candelas per meter squared, or 100 nits. And as I said, high dynamic range is brighter than 100 nits. But what it realistically means with modern televisions, not the old CRTs, on your television at home, is pretty much anything above 300 or thereabouts. And in fact, many televisions can actually peak at up to 4,000 nits. And that's why I made reference to the fact you could be squinting looking at the sun shown on a TV. But it's applied not to the overall image on the screen, it's actually about all the speculars and highlights. Yeah, so the bright points, the silver shiny things, the sun. Thank you. And if you go out there today and buy yourself a nice $500 television, it probably is be about 350 nits. If you can spend a little bit more, maybe up to about $700 or $800, it might be 1,000 nits. And if you spend this is a 55-inch screen, I'm not selling you TVs, by the way. You might even get one that goes up to 2,000 or 3,000 nits for less than $3,000 or $4,000. It's very much, you get what you pay for. It's a bit like hi-fi. You know, you can still have a hi-fi home with 2 watts RMS per channel, and it will play your lovely music and you'll be fine with it. But if you had 400 watts per channel, you would be really thumping the party out at home. And it's the same thing with televisions. Okay, and this is where you get a little reference to what a television is. Televisions today are not the CRTs of old. We're going to do the L's and the O's and the Q's in a minute. We'll tell you all a little bit more about those, about the differences between them. But before we get into that, we're going to get into the other side of the equation from high dynamic range, and that is wide colour gamut. I've come back to the CIE 1931 XYZ diagram again, haven't I? This time, though, there's going to be a little bit more information that's useful here. I've got a picture of a Coke can in the middle. Why have I got a picture of a Coke can? Coke cans are very interesting. You can do this at home. You can test how good your television is by having a high dynamic range, wide colour gamut capture of video of a can of Coke, and you get an actual can of Coke. And if you place it in front of your TV screen, how good the colour reproduction of your television is aligned with that can of Coke. Because if it's similar in colour, and even identical, it means it's actually got a very wide colour gamut, and it's a very good colour representation on the TV. Pretty much any older television that is not high dynamic range wide colour gamut will never show the can of Coke anything close to what it really looks like in real reality. Now, I'm using the can of Coke as an example. For advertisers, it's actually their products. If they're selling you nice cars, it's a good idea when they sell you a car that they've got the colours of the car, and when you see a video of it, it looks like actually what it looks like in real life. And generally it doesn't, because of the way older televisions don't reproduce the colour very well. And even some modern TVs don't. And this comes down to the fact that HD television, think about this is that all the range of possible colours that you could possibly have. This rather obtusely called Rec 709 is what HD TV used. So it could only reproduce this colour group in there. All the colours just within that, and only within that, and nothing more. Cinema came along and increased that, and they created something called a P3 colour gamut, which is shown here, which you find a lot now in high dynamic range wide colour gamut televisions. And that covers this gamut of colour. And that's great. In fact, red Coke can is just around here somewhere, just on the offside of the Rec 709 before it gets to the P3. Okay. On top of that, then they came along with computer screens, sRGB. It's about the same as Rec 709, but it's actually slightly different. But what we aim for in Ultra HD television technologies is Rec 2020, which is this lovely purple line here. And you can see that covers a lot more of the range of colours. Notice it doesn't cover all of them. Why shouldn't we be trying to get all of those colours? Well, the interesting thing is, and I'll use this microphone just to show you, you can just about see it on this particular diagram. This is the same thing. But this little white line, it's called Pointer's gamut. Pointer's gamut is the range of possible colours of reflective surfaces, effectively natural colours. If I could actually show you that over here, you would notice it's beyond the 709 line, but it's within the P3 and the Rec 2020 lines. So actually currently, P3 in some areas produces more colours than our eye can see, and Rec 2020 definitely does. So actually there's no point really going beyond Rec 2020, unless of course you're in a company that likes to produce alien surfaces and wants to make something look really quite weird and bizarre on screen, because of course televisions are not limited by reflective surface technology. There you go. I love the Coke can bit though. In fact, a few years ago as a demo at an industry event, I took a set of artificial grass with me to show off the fact that grass also is outside of this Rec 709 in most places. So when you actually go to a football match, you see the grass on the pitch, it's actually nothing like what it shows on TV. So, L, LED, LCD. Or was it LCD, LED? Well, here's the thing. Televisions. Most televisions today that you buy, you refer to them as LED TVs. They're not actually LED TVs, really. They're LCD TVs with an LED backlight, but we tend to call them LED TVs. And it's important to understand how they work, because I'm going to tell you something that's going to save you some money soon. You'll go home and save money immediately on this with your LED TV. This is how a TV is constructed. It consists of the case, consists of the backlight to display light through some filters and an LCD panel. Then through some color filters, through the glass, and presents a lovely picture on the screen. The important thing to take away from this that you'll go home with tonight is the LED LCD TV works by throwing light away. It's actually one of the most inefficient forms of displaying an image that I've ever come across, because it throws away almost all the light, especially if it's dark screen. It will actually still have the backlight running full blast for a dark scene in a movie, because at least 1 pixel will still need to be displayed to create the image. So the best thing you can do is to figure out how to actually not have that LED running all the time. And actually there's a clever little trick. Most televisions today adapt for the luminance of the room in which you're viewing the television, and therefore the best way to save energy, up to 50% of that energy, is just to close your curtains. And it'll be better anyway, because you'll be able to pick out all the details on that display, because actually you probably bought that lower spec television, the one that actually doesn't display very bright anyway. So that's L. After L comes O, OLED. OLED is different from an LED LCD. LED LCD is a transmissive technology. It's got big light, shines it through, filters it, and displays the picture. OLEDs are different. Organic light emitting diodes. Effectively, these are emissive technologies. And it's pretty much the same thing. There's a backlight unit, an optical sheet, some polarized film, an LCD on the side for the LCD. But if you look at OLED, it's got no backlight. It's got the actual OLED emission panel, which is printed, by the way, using organic materials to emit light, with a lot of ways of getting power there to generate as much light as possible. And a refiner for the color, polarization, and it displays. What it means for you, it's also very thin, but what it also means for you, unfortunately, it's one of the most expensive types of television that you can get in a normal retail shop today. Yeah, you're going to be looking for a 55-inch panel, about $1,000 to $1,500 for a 55-inch, compared to a $300 TV or a $400 TV. But I'll tell you what, it'd be better, because it's not only just the fact that it's actually going to save you energy, because its image varies and the brightness, the light generated, it varies with the actual image. It's also the fact that they call it deeper blacks, which I take great offense to, because there's no such thing as a deeper black. It's black. If it's not black, it's grey. And what all it does here, though, is they can actually take you back to the colour of the screen without any light on it, without any problem at all. Yeah, it's got a very fine touch control of that light, so that actually you don't get what we call bloom, which you do on LED screens, where if you display something that's crossing one of the borders on the LED, you get some of the light being blocked by the LCD panel, and it just, some of it leaks through. With the OLED, you don't get any of that. It's very crisp. Well worth the money, if you can get one. We do recommend it heavily. Again, I don't sell TVs. I have one. My wife will tell you all about it. But then there are also alternatives. There's something called a QLED. This is very clever technology, though. QLED is using quantum dot film. It's clever, but it's still an LED TV. However, it's got one advantage over OLEDs. OLEDs have problems with color reproduction and with how much brightness they can go. They tend to be relatively, they require a lot of power to generate the light. So you generally won't find OLEDs running 2, 3, 4,000 nits. But QLEDs you will. Okay, but they're still fundamentally LED TVs, all the downsides of LED TVs. Yeah? But I bring them up because I'm going to tell you the truth. The world is split into OLEDs and QLEDs for the high end. And they're constantly battling about it at the moment. Okay, next, another set of terminology, D. This is the one you hate. This is the one you don't like, if you like to share your content. Okay, digital rights management. 3 letters that govern almost everything we do in TV to make sure you pay for it. And it's actually a modern internet technology. Before this, we used to do something called conditional access. Those people old enough to have a satellite box or a cable box with a smart card in it. That was a conditional access system, worked as a one-way protection mechanism, distributing an encryption key to your box so that just your box could decrypt that particular content that was delivered to you. What DRM does is much cleverer because it can rely on a return path, it can rely on the internet for getting a handshake taking place for the key being delivered to your device to be able to decrypt the content without you really noticing it exists. Of course, you will notice it though when you go outside the country like I do and it says, not allowed to be played if you're in America. No. Not allowed to be played on my plane. No. Not going to do that. It always happens to me, by the way, because we got content on Prime Video in the UK. You bring it over here, you connect your device to the internet. It says, no, we don't have the rights for that here. You can't watch that. That's DRM, pretty much. And this just shows the typical construction of that. And you'll notice how the diagram is drawn. I love the way the diagram is drawn because it focuses on the key being transmitted. It doesn't focus on the actual content. Despite that, it's the whole reason it exists. Okay. K is for kilohertz. We've talked a lot about kilohertz. Bandwidth. But we've talked about both types of bandwidth. There are 2 types of bandwidth. Frequency bandwidth and data bandwidth. They're different. They're related, but not completely. It's important because I love this phrase to describe it better. Frequency bandwidth, which is all the analog signals floating around, it's actually quite an inefficient way of sending pictures and imagery and other files. Okay? But when we have to put into digital data bits, we can be very efficient. We do all sorts of compression schemes, modulation schemes. We can really make a lot of things appear in a very small amount of frequency spectrum, which is actually the thing that's actually really, truly rare, is frequency spectrum. You'll know that once you actually go to a football match and your phone doesn't work. That's because generally the frequency spectrum is actually being used up by all the people on the phones in the area, and you can't make calls. Despite the fact, actually, there's probably enough data spectrum to transmit stuff. But I like this phrase, quart into a pint pot. It's an old English phrase, describes the situation amazingly. A quarter, as in a quarter of a gallon, you can get that into a pint glass where if you want to digitally modulate and digitally encode and compress stuff. And that's why bandwidth is a really key and cool thing with regard to video, because we have lots of data. It's how we can convert 18 gigabits of a 4K stream into delivery to your home in 15 megabits. Especially with all those techniques I told you about frames and only sending part of the data, etc. All that is all about reducing the amount of data delivered to your home. One day we won't need this. One day, I can foresee it, we'll have we could have uncompressed video delivered to your home. Simply because we'll have optical fibers in place, and yes, you'll be able to deliver really high speed data without compressing. But then again, that's a bit of a waste. We probably won't go away. Some key data points. I mentioned 6 megahertz earlier. I didn't actually say why 6 megahertz was very important for the Americans, but not very important for the rest of the world. Americans wanted to broadcast their television within 6 megahertz chunks of bandwidth. So analog channel was 6 megahertz chunk. When you segment your cable networks, it's 6 megahertz chunks. 6 megahertz. The rest of the world never had that problem that required them to implement fractional frame rates because we have 8 megahertz chunks. We never had that problem of overlapping audio and video within the frequency spectrum. It saved us so much pain. Okay, N is for next-gen TV, which you may have heard of as ATSC 3.0. Some of you might even have it, if you bother to have an antenna on your roof. It's relatively new. It's very similar to what we've had in the UK and Europe and largely the rest of the world for 20 years. But it's got one clever thing, really clever thing, and that is it changed what they refer to as the transport packet that it uses. MPEG-2 is not only defines the way we compress video, it defines how we package the video. And then MPEG-2 transport stream is made up of packets, which are called MPEG transport stream packets, and that's what we use in the rest of the world. But here, instead of that, they had a clever thought. Why don't we just make it an IP packet like the internet? Very clever, very useful. It actually means they can more dynamically intermix video from 2 sources, one from broadcast, one from the internet, if they so wish. And that's very clever, but they're barely using it yet. But they will be soon. They are now starting to deliver on-demand or even live streams over the internet in combination with broadcast services. Yes?
So can you get away from paying Xfinity cable if you have this antenna?
Yes. It is free-to-air television.
You say that we'll be able to do it on the internet as well?
It will have streaming data as well. A little interesting thing to know is the rest of the world hasn't kept quiet and stayed in one place since they deployed their free-to-air television during the early 2000s. They've moved on to where they've combined and produced hybrid platforms. And actually now there are a move to a fully streamed free-to-air platforms.
You still need the antenna for that.
But no, in our sense, no. In the UK, certainly, within the next few months, there's this platform called Freely, which is going to launch there, which is 100% streamed to televisions with no set-top box.
Through the internet?
Through the internet, yes.
But not here in the States?
No, and that would be free, completely free. And not here in the US. Here you have what they call fast services, which are free ad-supported streaming, which in the rest of the world we call channels, because a lot of the rest of the world has a very highly developed market for ad-supported broadcast media. In the US, there hasn't been. Cable networks really have dominated for many decades, and because of that, now streaming over the internet has got a new dynamism here through fast, because it gives you what the rest of the world has had on normal broadcast services, but delivered over the internet. And then the rest of the world is sort of semi-copying you by doing a lot more delivery of ad-supported media over the internet. Yes?
From a consumer standpoint, right? There are 2 companies that I can think of. If you know Roku,
Yes.
they have their own free streaming channel. So is that using next-gen TV?
No. Roku, what was the other one for Roku and? Pluto. So Pluto is a fast service. Roku is a platform. Roku is a closed service. People have to pay to be on their platform or share the revenue. So from that perspective, they're identical to a cable company.
So who is 2B or who's the...
2B, they're all, again, they are fast services, and you find that they're just applications that have to be available in the app store of the device you're connecting to the TV.
So who is there one brand name? Is it free?
Next-gen TV literally is the free-to-air television broadcasters in every market in the US. So it's not branded as such. It is just whatever you receive in that area. So Sinclair, for example,
The antenna, I get that. But what about
you generally get what's associated with your market because they're very still tied to those particular business models that localize to a market. It's interesting. I can see it being overtaken by events, if you see what I mean, especially because there is no inherent sort of deployment of existing antennas in the US homes. And also because but the geography also is against it. You've got a large spread out geography, not concentrated into small cities and big cities. So from that perspective, but it's very interesting from a set of technology. It's very important here in the US, especially if you want some free TV and you actually can receive a signal. It's rapidly building at the moment. So after N comes TV everywhere, which is almost a good jump. T for TV everywhere. I love a nice random AI generated image. You have to ask really hard not include text because it's really bad at doing any text. Yeah, it's designed to misspell it. At least it got TV everywhere in this at the bottom. TV everywhere. Actually, this is what has happened without you noticing it. The last 10 years, we've moved from where TV was delivered to televisions and set-top boxes to where it's delivered to PCs, tablets, mobile phones, smart screens, all around your house, when you're sat on the train, if you can have a train, when you're on the plane if you want to, if you've got offline service. It literally is. We have TV everywhere today, and it's probably more dominant outside the US because of the fact in the US there's been a dominance from cable networks. But people like Comcast have actually been developing this as well. Their focus, they know that their future is involved in IP-based video delivery. And that's actually what's made TV everywhere possible. It's IP, the internet, because it's called collapsing the network. So you don't need a separate network for everything. You collapse it all onto one basic transport, which is IP. Whether that's delivered over an antenna, whether it's delivered over a cable network, whether it's delivered over a fiber, whether it's delivered over a 5G connection. The thing that joins them all up is IP. It simplifies the delivery. It actually helps you because actually you don't need to have separate wiring in your house. You've all got Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi actually works really well in people's homes, and it means that you rarely will need to think about where your video comes from. It just works. TV everywhere. There are still companies in this world who ignore TV everywhere for some reason. They're not long for this world.
Such as? Some
companies in Europe only have their television delivery works well through the main TV and through strange obscure apps on some devices, and not all devices work. Sky. So they're getting there. They will understand it. But the job of many companies today, many operators today, people like the big telecom companies like Deutsche Telekom, BT, etc., is to make sure they can deliver TV to every single device you have, whether they have supplied it to you or not. Very important. Okay, P. Prosumers. And I've got my little marker in the wrong place. Damn it. Prosumers. This is something that's really big has changed. If you look in your pocket right now, today, you've got a camera, a computer, an MP3 player, almost saying the same thing that Steve Jobs said once, but actually, you have a converged device that actually do lots of different things and actually do it incredibly well. You can capture 4K, high dynamic range video with wide color gamut without you even thinking that you're doing it, knowing you're doing it. You can also, through free software and platforms like Twitch, YouTube, transmit that to all your friends, neighbors, and beyond. This is the world of the prosumer. You can do professional video from your home as good as anyone could do it even 10 years ago in a formal production professional organization. Really can. It's important, really important. And it's even now coming to photography. You now can take high dynamic range, wide color gamut photographs and post them to Instagram. And you barely even noticed it happened, but it happened over the last 18 months. So you've got some really good stuff happening, and you'll notice the difference. Good idea, post your pictures to Instagram and Facebook, then find out where your password is for Facebook. Go in and you can compare the pictures from the standard dynamic range version and the high dynamic range version. It's really good, really cool. You can literally run a TV company from your bedroom. Okay, M, machine learning. I'm not going to go in depth on machine learning. I'm just going to mention these are just some of the areas where machine learning has already been active for the last decade, even before AI ML was famous. Yeah, it's been a key part of what the media industry has been doing for years because of the fact that it allows us to optimize all sorts of stuff that we can't do very easily as humans. This actually partly comes from a presentation delivered by a person called Rich Welsh, who works for a company called Deluxe, who are a very big production company, who gave a presentation on behalf of the IoT Media Group, and it's available on our YouTube channel. And he goes through a lot of these with examples. So definitely do watch that video. You'll recognize some of them because you're already doing them at home. Voice recognition on your remote control. It's been available for a decade. That's all done through ML. Content discovery. How they figure out what you want to watch. It's all through deriving and determining algorithms to identify what your viewing is like and what they think you're going to watch in future. But the latest sort of 5 years, and 2 years specifically, have been super exciting because of what it's been able to do in generating video and audio. The generative AI stuff is actually incredibly exciting. However, it's not as useful as people think it is. Because when you're generating content, it is a better experience when it involves a human in its generation. And really, ML is really helping the artists of this world basically do the more humdrum stuff, while at the same time allowing those people who are humdrum, like us, to create something that we can't produce otherwise. Especially background images on PowerPoint presentations. R is for regulations. Oh, I love it. Being here in America, giving a presentation with regulations on a chart. Regulation is a key part of a lot of discussion in the industry at the moment, even in the US, because of the fact that what the power of lots of changes that have taken place in the way video is working in the last few years is giving. The ability to transmit and create a TV channel from your home, that's a regulatory nightmare for many countries. It's how do you manage that within the legal framework of your country. Yeah, it's not just about controlling speech. It's actually about making sure people don't create dangerous speech. And it's very complicated. And I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it's something which is heavily bound to everything we do. These are just some of the key areas where regulations are impacting us at the moment. Sustainability is a key one, because we do need to focus on reducing energy usage, reducing the wastage of energy we have, so it gives people who are generating electricity a chance to generate sustainable energy. So watch more TVs in the dark with the curtains closed, and you can make things better. Accessibility, equal access, media controls, deepfakes, child protection, all these things are active discussions. I'm involved in some accelerators as part of the IT this year, which are covering some of these. Again, where people are identifying how we can manage the situation with the technologies move. But I have confidence. Those regulations do matter. And they will work and they will help us all. Sustainability, key point. I talked about the energy on the TV display. It's also about the plastics in the set-top boxes in the TVs. It's also about how long those TVs last. Yeah, it's about companies not necessarily driving for TVs to be replaced every 3 years. It's about making sure those TVs are supported for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. It's happening now a lot that you're finding the fact that you'll be able to have supported products that will last a lot longer. And at the end, they'll take them back and they'll recycle them. And actually, it's become an important part of those companies that actually they've realized that sustainability actually is very cost effective at times. Yeah, they can do some great engineering solutions with that. So that's S. J, a non-technical subject. John Logie Baird, otherwise known as the man who invented the television you don't watch. He literally didn't invent that television, he invented the electromechanical television. Yes. And thank God we don't have that today, because that was a nightmare. It was huge. It had a big rotating disc and flickering lights and required lots of illumination. And worse, live video delivery, which he did try for a few months as part of the initial launch of BBC television in the UK in 1936, involved capturing programming on film, automatically developing that film in seconds with large amounts of chemicals that would have been an environmental nightmare, and then displaying that film, produced, actually developed, and projecting that onto a sensor that then would be transmitted. Yeah? But the British do love referring to him now as the man who invented television, but I do love pointing out, even as an IT member, even with the BBC's involvement, being in part of Savoy Place for many years during the early 30s, yeah, he's the one who invented the television we don't watch. However, he did invent the colour television, the first colour television. And in fact, you've got some key dates here. First working television, 25. First working publicly demonstrated, 1926. First long-distance transmission of television, 1927. First working colour television in 1928. But as I said, probably not the TV we would have wanted to watch. He didn't use a fully electronic solution, which is what Philo Farnsworth developed, the American, who really invented television. Yes, exactly. But the British love someone who tried hard and lost. But you may notice that the key date, he was somewhat behind because he had to invent all the electronics first. Really important. Oh, there is actually a model of what he used, but it literally was the fact he used a rotating disc to create the sampling for a camera on a sensor to actually create the image. But because it was mechanical, he had to have a bright light to actually do that, and you had to have really heavy makeup on things. It wouldn't be very practical.
They still transmitted it wirelessly.
Yeah. I still transmitted it wirelessly. That was the easy bit.
Okay, still.
Because the key thing that Farnsworth invented was the sensor that actually captured the light. That was electronic. Sorry. It's okay. So we'll get some time at the end for questions as well, as we can do it more there. Okay. So, Z, the last one. For Zoom. Zoom, the thing we've used so much. Actually, it's very clever. But actually, it's not that clever compared to all the other solutions available. Especially when throughout the whole lockdown period, we found out some flaws, that it wasn't quite true what it did. So it was portrayed as a fully end-to-end encrypted service, but it never was until about 2/3 of the way through lockdown when they finally did that piece. Because end-to-end means that only you have the keys, not the service. And what they were doing was they were breaking out the service in the central data warehouses and then actually joining people up on those connections. However, I will say this, every audio and video conferencing solution had that problem and still has. Pretty much, because the issue happens when everyone's not on a computer. Or if anyone's not on a computer, that's when it breaks. Because the moment someone phones on a phone and dials in, as a certain German officer found out at a certain military base, the Russians can pick you up. That's important to note. But in good normal usage, Zoom's great. Zoom's fine. It's as good as any other solution. And it's actually amazing. You've got so much information available for it.
So what was the advantage of Zoom over Skype? Had a 20-year head start and lost it in 6 months.
Skype just didn't have the features.
Okay.
Didn't have the features. In fact, that's what it is. No one had they just had the features before other people that made it easy to use.
The user interface.
Yes, but things like, for example, Teams requires you to have a Microsoft account. Also, Teams doesn't work very well between different organizations because of the Microsoft account. Citrix. The WebEx. WebEx, pretty much everyone before lockdown was only ever using WebEx via voice calls. No one was using it for video. And that's all it did. It just did things in a cooler way. It could have been Blue Jeans time for all that mattered. You know, if anyone remembers Blue Jeans. But it just worked. And actually, the other thing about it was a lot cheaper. A professional account for Zoom was $11, $12. A professional account for WebEx was like 30 something. You know, money talks. Good. So that's the A to Z, or as I should really say, the AA to Z and Z, because I did do an AI and an ABR. So really, you could find out a little bit more about the IT Media Group by following us in various places. We are on X still, just about, but the IT Media page on LinkedIn is a great place to follow to find out what we're doing, and also it's a good time to look up our YouTube channel, which has a wide variety of our different sessions that we've put on over the last 2 to 3, 4 years, and you can have a good look there at various different things. I do apologize, some of them aren't very in-depth, all of them are very long form, but they're very worthwhile watching. Particularly the segment of 3 presentations done over the last 4 months, looking at AI involved in various areas of television, specifically audio mixing for sports, specifically film and broadcast applications, as well as their application to personalized video delivery. So just remember, they are about an hour long. And for that, thank you. And any questions? Yes?
How do I do my home TV station?
Oh, there's a long list. You need a good computer. Good laptop would be fine. It has a built-in camera to start with. You do need a good camera. I recommend certain Logitech devices that are 4K cameras, even though you won't use 4K, because pretty much all of that will really only support HD streaming right now. You need OBS, which is an open source software that pretty much everyone uses. You obviously also need to have your YouTube account and Twitch account set up correctly. There are limitations on those services until you've identified who you are, because they don't let anybody do whatever they damn well please. And the other thing is, if you want to start without live and move on and look at some of the on-demand stuff to start with, in addition to OBS, I do recommend Blackmagic software that's available for free to download, that allows you to edit your video with great panache and professionalism. There you go. And just try things. Oh, you do need to have a good microphone as well. Microphone, any microphone, but have a microphone that's separate to the device. I'll show you later. Okay. Yes?
So you know how like, Apple has its own marketing words for a lot of things that they do?
Yes.
You have a MacBook as well. So when you go into settings and you try to change the different color profiles, Apple Pro Display.
Yes.
Can you kind of talk about what kind of color profile that's using versus the standard?
So what you're missing, actually it's down to the fact that those settings you're referring to are actually color profiles for particular displays. So that is literally for the XDR display, which is a particular nit rated color gammated display. You're best if you're using, if you want to produce content for more general usage, then you'd look for the Rec 2020 or P3 color profiles, because that will actually set yourself up so that any video you produce, you can actually look and see what it looks like in those color formats. The thing to note, however, is that Apple is very easy to use, but at times it doesn't work particularly well, particularly with this. I think the classic one is the thing you have to understand is if you connect your MacBook to a display, no matter what you think the UI says about the resolution you're at, it's always at the native resolution of the display. And suddenly you'll find yourself in a world of pain trying to find these lots of little dongles and adapters to change it so that actually it produces it in a particular way. But this is it. This is true of all of the equipment. It's a lot better now than it was. If I had an Apple MacBook from 5 years ago or a Windows 10 machine from that time ago, I used to have a lot more problems trying to produce HDR, wide color gamut content, or even see HDR and wide color gamut content. Now with Windows 11, the latest macOS releases, it generally does work. It's just a little bit of a challenge when making the content that you have to make the display, make the device do exactly what you want. And also you have to understand that the monitors you buy to actually do the color grading, which is a key factor of producing any content, for you to see what it should look like, you're going to be spending a lot more money than the average display. In fact, we recommend certain OLED display models which cost upwards of several $1,000s just for the display. Anyone else?
Having a free TV again, I mean, many people try to get free TV in the US, and does it shut down one way or the other?
Yeah, you can. As I say, literally with next gen TV, my best advice to you is get one on your roof.
Yes. What if I don't want to do it on my roof? How do I get that software?
Do it via the internet, and you're looking at ad supported TV content then only. If it's free and it's on the internet and it's totally free and there's no adverts, it means it's pirated, pretty much.
Well, there are people try to set a little antenna, 100 antennas in a warehouse somewhere.
Oh,
rent it
yeah.
for $5.
That fell foul of trying to work itself around copyright law in specific states, which is never a good thing. If you're trying to find a workaround, that's not a good way of building a good business model. Yeah.
I want you to answer that. So at our home, we have this kind of white wall-based antenna that just goes around the wall next to your window.
Yes.
The idea is it kind of goes with the local channels. You get
Yeah.
free streaming.
No, I have that, but
Yeah.
it depends where your house is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
See-
Kind of half of it, that's what I
See, in the UK, pretty sort of good 70 or 80% of houses have a very large ultra-wideband antenna on the roof for free TV reception. And we've got them anyway, and you just invest in that and it works better. But then again, we've also got a very geographically concentrated country, really. But it's still, the antennas we have are 5 or 6 times what you try to use here. And that's probably the biggest advice to you, is get a proper antenna. Yes, sorry. John, at the back there, sorry. Go ask a question.
It's a dumb question, but my HDMI cables.
Yeah, no.
A real thing.
They can be with HDMI 2.1 if you've got really particularly long ones. But yeah, my personal advice to you though is just buy relatively low cost cables. If they are gold or if they have more than $20, then you are being defrauded. Except of course, if you're trying to run a cable more than 6 feet. Because actually those high-speed HDMI cables are really only designed for doing the connection between a device and a TV display. They're not supposed to be running it down around your house. They're not supposed to be running it from a projector hanging on the ceiling that's a good 6 meters away by the routing to the TV. They're not really designed for that. But then I could advise you to look at the active fiber-based retransmitter HDMI setups you can get. So they have a short copper HDMI lead at one end, and at the other another short copper lead, and in between they actually have a fiber remodulation that takes place so that you pass it over a fiber link, and it gives you the range, because fiber HDMI cables are very, very susceptible to timing issues. They are designed as a high-speed, short-distance mechanism. Yeah. In that case, if there's no more questions, that's everything then. Thank you.